Hello and welcome to AXSChat. I'm delighted that we're joined today by Carol van Den Hende, who is an author and speaker and also corporate warrior, but we're not here to talk about the corporate warrior bit today. So, Carol, you're the author of the Goodbye Orchid series of books. Can you tell us a little bit more about your writing and the motivation behind it?
Absolutely. So sometimes I say the short answer to what inspired me to write the Goodbye Orchid series is the fact that one of my twins started to have problems, and we realized that he had special needs. And during that time, as we were going on that journey to find ways to support my son with special needs, I was inspired by stories in the news of combat wounded veterans coming back. And really, what it was the strength and resilience that those veterans demonstrated to get back to good that gave me hope in our future for our son and started me writing. So that created this passion for exploring. And I thought I was writing for myself initially when I was pouring my heart out on the page. And it turned out as I joined groups of writers and shared my work, there was one instance in particular in which I was able to, as I was sharing a portion of the story in which the main character faces a life-changing accident, I brought this table of writers to tears. And it made me realize that perhaps this work had the power to touch others as well. And so that's what started me on this journey.
Great. Yeah, I had a meeting recently where I was on with a colleague and a client, and I got the message afterwards, good job, you made her cry. Not in a bad way, right? I think it was it's like, oh, I feel like you understand. But yes, absolutely, that emotional connection was really important. So yes, so fantastic. So tell us a little bit more about the sort of the series, and obviously you've got multiple books now. I see several behind you.
Yes, so the series is now a trilogy. In fact, the third in the trilogy will come out next week. And each of them has, a theme in it that is very relevant for our conversation today. So in book one, which is Orchid Blooming, readers will meet main character Orchid Page. She is half Asian, just like my twins are half Asian. And as a child, she did, kind of have tragedy. So she had lost her parents at a young age, and she even witnessed their death, which resulted in her having PTSD. Now, as an adult, she's actually a strong, resilient woman with a career. And now what she wants more than anything is to win a work trip to China to feel closer to the memory of her mother. But that PTSD does, become a challenge along the way. And the beauty of Orchid Blooming is really showing the ways in which she seeks mental health support, the way in which she gets that, and really finds a way to her best life. Now, along that way, because of her challenges, actually, her boss says that trip to China that she wants to win, she needs more advertising experience. So along the way, she meets the handsome head of an ad agency, successful Phoenix Walker. And in book two, which is Goodbye Orchid, what happens right in chapter one is that an accident befalls Phoenix. He actually is in the subway station in New York. He sees a homeless gentleman who is at his wit's end and is about to throw himself on the tracks in front of a train that's entering the station. Phoenix is a big-hearted, generous person. He grabs the homeless man, pulls him back from the edge, and saves his life, but ends up on the tracks himself. And as a result, he sustains injuries that will change his life forever, which we can talk about in a moment. But that, so when I say the books are inspired by combat wounded veterans, even though the characters are not combat wounded veterans, they go through an experience like that between the PTSD that Orchid has, and then Phoenix, because of his life-changing injuries, actually goes through a journey of, grief, of denial, bargaining, acceptance, and ultimately finding that life can be more than whole, no matter what he thinks he might be missing, in Goodbye Orchid. And it's a beautiful story in which Springboard Consulting actually named me Disability Hero of the Year for the work in Goodbye Orchid. And multiple Purple Heart decorated veterans have endorsed the series for that depiction of what Phoenix goes through and his, not only his physical recovery, but his emotional recovery as well.
Deborah, you're muted.
Thank you, Neil. Carol, welcome to the program. I've been blessed to also interview you on my other program, and I really like how you bring your characters to life. I think that's a real gift, certainly any author can do. But why do you think, Carol, that it's so important that that authors really explore these topics from all the diverse ways that you do it, from really digging into the lens of what it means to be truly human? Why do you think that is so important for authors to really bring out? I know that sometimes authors are criticized for, I saw one author criticized, I thought it was honestly unfair criticism, but you can't stop social media. But she was being criticized because people were saying that she was doing too much inspirational porn and that her story was too inspiring, which is interesting because, we want to inspire each other. We certainly don't want to do inspirational porn, but it feels like it's sometimes a tough line to walk when you're really building out your characters to make them look like, human beings.
Yeah, I mean, I think those are two great questions in there, Deborah. And the first one about, why write? Because I have a full-time job, I have twins, I'm busy. So for me to find time for writing, it means it is incredibly meaningful and important to me. And I had to ask myself my inspiring purpose question. What's the reason for me to write, beyond the obvious, profit and functional purposes? And the answer that came to me was really, I have a mission to inspire hope and empathy for people and planet. And the writing is such a big part of doing that. Writing has actually been shown to deepen empathy. Fiction in particular, because you do get to walk in someone else's shoes, you get to see the world through someone else's eyes. And readers have told me either they've been through medical challenges or trauma or disability, and they feel so seen on the pages of the Goodbye Orchid series. Or readers also tell me that they've never had that personal experience, and perhaps they don't even know someone who has. But seeing that experience through Phoenix's eyes, through Orchid's eyes, deepens their empathy for those experiences. And so that's the why that is so motivating to me, to be able to deepen empathy.
Right. And I think that's needed more than ever right now, isn't it?
It sure is. It would be lovely to have more of that in the world. And then the second question you're asking about, what are the ways to navigate that difficult space between having a lived experience, and if you don't have the lived experience, for me, because of my respect for the wounded veterans, for the people with disabilities that did inspire me to start writing this series, I did so much research to ensure that I was getting, not only the details of recovery right, but also the emotional nuances. And of course, not everyone's experience is the same, and everyone's having an individual experience. So there's no way to be able to say that you can universally represent that. I completely, and humbly say that for sure, it's not universal representation. But in addition to the research, for me, it was really important to have great sensitivity readers. So people who have had the lived experience that I depict in the books, and that they were able to really help guide and shape and, give me pointers to be able to achieve the level of authenticity that, I see in the reviews that come back, in the endorsements that come back from wounded veterans and people with disabilities. Those touch me tremendously, because I really only want to do this work if it can do good in the world. And so to hear that kind of feedback is tremendous. Now, you talked about this idea, can something be too inspiring? And it reminded me, I think one of the earliest people I worked with on the series is Sergeant Brian Anderson. He had fought in the Iraq War. He actually shipped out from the US on 9/11. And he served multiple tours of duty. On his last tour of duty in 2005, he was injured in an ID, or improvised explosive device explosion. As a result, he instantaneously, the IED instantaneously took both of his legs and his left hand. And so in that moment, he actually thought to himself, life will not be the same again. And he's been such a big help for me in this series. And one of the things he said was, because people will go up to him and say to him, oh, you're so inspiring, because he's out grocery shopping or, putting gas in his car or whatever. And I took this to heart so much when he said, listen, I'm not here to inspire other people. I'm just living the best life I can, just like any of us. And I think that is so true. And so for me, thank you, Deborah, for saying that I have this gift of being able to depict the characters. For me, I get very deeply into the characters, and I strive to, see the world through their eyes. So seeing the world through Phoenix's eyes after he lands on that train track and wakes in the hospital to find, spoiler alert, that the train has taken his arm and his leg. And so, kind of walking in that, through that lens, seeing through things through that lens, and really having Brian's words of wisdom in my mind helped keep me, on the path as right and true as I could strive to achieve.
No, Carol, I was about to ask you about how you prepare your books, about the research that you are doing in order to come with the characters, and you already answered to that almost in full. But I would like to ask, in this space of supporting veterans and supporting people with disabilities, there's also a world of science, of research out there that is helping to improve the lives of people. How do you look into advances in science and in technology and bring that to your books as also sometimes a way of showing people some of the possibilities that they have in order to improve their lives?
Yeah, and that makes so much sense, hearing that question from you, because I know that there's so much technological expertise on this call today. And so that's an exciting question. The research takes form in many ways, and there is a lot of information on the internet around the technological advancements in prosthetic devices or adaptive devices to help. So the ways that shows up in my storytelling, first, there's absolutely the use of technology that is appropriate. So Phoenix has prosthetic devices, but also I show how they can differ depending on what his needs are. So he used to compete in triathlons and really wants to be a triathlete again. And so for him to start running again, he needs a running blade. And he talks about how the running blade is a little bit longer, and he can walk with it also because it has the extra little heel adaptive piece in the back to be able to, so he can walk as well. But he has to be a little more careful. He has to look for twigs and whatever on the sidewalk as he's getting to his running path. And so that, for instance, that level of detail, or sharing then when he comes back from his run, how he, takes off the prosthetic device, how he handles his silicone liner, and how he, maybe can change the amount of socks that he's wearing during the day, depending on whether his limb is, shrinking or swelling. Those are little details that people aren't that aware of. And then when they see, the amount of thought that needs to go into it, needing to, maybe carry a torque wrench with you so you can make little adjustments during the day, those types of things, you realize, because sometimes people who don't have that depth of experience might oversimplify and say, oh, well, you lose a leg, we'll just wear a prosthetic leg. It's not that simple, and the types of issues that can happen with the skin breaking down, or, just all the little nuances are ones that I strive to depict with great authenticity. I would add maybe two more points. One is, in the storyline, the Phoenix talks about how it isn't fair that insurance might not cover all of the extra types of prosthetic devices that they might consider luxury items. So yes, they'll cover a prosthetic leg, but they might not cover the sports leg or the specialty ones, and they're very expensive. So the fundraising that helps people with prostheses, I think, is amazing. Heather Abbott Foundation, for instance, donates prostheses to people who, insurance isn't covering those. And I think that's really wonderful. And I'll just share one more because I think it's such an interesting area that you're bringing up. The other part of the storyline is Orchid works in the beauty industry. And as she gets to know, what Phoenix is going through, it inspires her to create a line of skincare products that instead of, burn creams and scar creams and amputee balm that is packaged very medicinally and considered a very functional product, she elevates it to the level of luxury in order to say, you know what, these products are part of people's everyday lives and are as important to be luxury items as anything and deserve that. And that sends a message as well. And that's a beautiful culminating way in which actually the third book that I didn't talk about yet really helps with disability awareness and disability advocacy.
Excellent. I really like the point you're making. There's a couple of things I want to touch on. Definitely the point you made about insurance not covering everything is a real issue. It's pretty short-sighted, but it's not entirely surprising. But people look at things in a sort of a few inches in front of their nose sometimes, and I'm not talking about people so much as organizations. So whilst they may think, well, you've got your prosthetic, you don't need the running one, that's a luxury. Actually, as an insurer, if people don't stay fit, you're going to be paying out because they're going to acquire other disabilities. Maybe, it's obesity related conditions that cost more money again. So I think there is a growing recognition among some medical practitioners that there needs to be more sort of preventative medicine and societal care, but I think that's a mindset shift that hasn't in any way completed yet. I think we're on a beginning of a journey, so I think it's great that you're highlighting that. And then I think the other bit, the making stuff desirable is extremely important. Why should kit for people with disabilities always look, like it's something horrible from the hospital, when it's something you're using in everyday life. And particularly we've seen how transformative it's been with the mainstreaming of assistive tech in technology, where a lot of, for example, if someone needed AAC before, you would pay many thousands of pounds or dollars for a device where you'd be able to use text to speech. It would be made like it was a Fisher-Price toy designed for kids, infantilizing people because they can't speak. And now you can have an iPad, which is a desirable consumer device, and buy it for a fraction of the cost and download a piece of software that works for you. So that then brings accessibility and inclusion into the mainstream and makes it something that people have a desirable product, is something that they value that doesn't other them and make them stand out when they're already standing out quite often because of their difference. So I think that process of inclusion and you thinking about that is really important.
It's a wonderful point. And actually, I think so much of the innovations that have come about to help people with disabilities actually benefit the society as a whole. And so we should really celebrate that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's known as the curb cut effect. It's those extra benefits that you get. The design for the edges, make it better for the middle. So your books, all three of them, well, two of them published, I'm assuming available on all of the good places that you might get your books and consume your content in physical and digital form?
Correct. So they're available as, so there's paperback here, there's audiobook, there's ebook, and there's hardcover. The hardcovers are really gorgeous. I don't know if you can see. Here, I'll just show you one. So for instance, like the Always Orchid cover, actually underneath the jacket is the beautiful cover printed again. So it's they're really meant to be immersive experiences, not just in terms of the words and the storytelling, but also the beauty of the design. It's really meant to create an experience. In fact, the orchids are even on the bottom right corner of every page, and they will blossom or shatter until you get to the depths of the story and then visually come back together. So there's a lot of thought and love put into these books.
They're beautiful. They're beautiful.
No, I think I have to ask you, why orchids?
Oh, so yeah, that's a great question. The main character's name is Orchid, and it's quite meaningful. Both Phoenix's name and Orchid's name are very meaningful, specifically chosen for the journey that they go on. So Phoenix, I think, might be a bit more evident, given that phoenixes in mythology need to rise from ashes. And after Phoenix's accident, he certainly does rise from ashes. It's very realistic, the troubles he goes through, the challenges he goes through, but in the end, it is ultimately a very optimistic outcome. Orchid's name has meaning because orchids have a reputation for being delicate. And what happens in the storyline is Phoenix, when he wakes in the hospital after his life-changing accident, he's thinking about Orchid and he's longing for her, but he remembers that tragedy as a child, witnessing the death of her parents, means that she is sensitive to images of trauma. And so he feels he's faced with the hardest decision of his life. In order to care for her, he might need to leave her without explaining why, which is why the second book is called Goodbye Orchid. Now, her name is important because he has this view of orchids being delicate and wanting to protect her from his life-changing accident. And this is something that can happen in real life too. We can talk about that in a moment. But what's lovely is if you talk to orchidologists, people who study orchids, who grow orchids, they say orchids in the wild are actually quite resilient. They will grow on the barks of trees in rainforests. They'll grow in the air without soil. And that is this character orchid. While on the surface, because of what happened as a child, perhaps she might seem like she could be delicate, but actually she is quite strong and resilient. And I think that's a beautiful analogy, actually, for people with visible disabilities. Perhaps, others look and think, oh, that's somebody who's weak, but that is not the case. I think so much of, the messages I hear from the sensitivity readers I've worked with is, listen, maybe something terrible happened to me at one point, but I've come to see that might not be such a terrible thing, that it has taught me so much in life, and that I can live a very full and very wonderful life. And I hear that message again and again. And I think that's a beautiful message to share. So thanks for asking. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that answer. And I grow orchids. And I was always told that that they're very difficult to grow, but I actually find that's not true. They are very hardy. You just have to listen to the flower. If you listen to the flower, they're really beautiful. I love orchids so much. But I also wanted to state that the reality is we're all going to go through something, and probably many somethings, as we live our lives. It's just part of being a human being. And so, I think what I love about your books and other books like yours is that it reminds us that it's okay to be human and it's okay to have empathy for each other. And we all are different. We all look different sometimes. I get people looking at me all the time because I have purple hair. It's not normal, but I don't care. I like being a little different. It's a nod to the beautiful orchids. But I just think it's important to consume books like yours and others because we need to really understand the lived experiences of human beings. And we have decided as society that people with disabilities are broken, which is not true. People with disabilities are human. And by the way, we're all part of that tribe. We are all human and we're all diverse. And sometimes we have disabilities, sometimes we don't. So I think taking a step back and really appreciating our identities is very important. And that's one thing I loved about your books and why I had featured you on my other show and suggested you as here as a guest here, because we do need to explore the fiction and the characters and really understand people's lived experience, especially at a time, once again, where things are so intense and so scary right now in our world. So I just wanted to, also bring up those points. That's another reason why I appreciate what you're doing.
Those are beautiful words. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me coming from you, Deborah.
Thank you, Carol.
Oh.
Back to you, Neil.
I was struggling to find the mute button. Sorry, it's always terrible when you do that. I've only been using computers for decades, but still failing at the most basic of things. And I think that's the thing. We are all human. We all do have moments. And so taking it back to your own experiences and as the parent of a child that has special needs, as you described it, how has that that advocacy work through your writing impacted on how you then live your life as a parent, caring and advocating for your child? Has it had a positive impact?
Yes, so I feel like it definitely it has had an impact. And one of the ways in which I think you're asking me, how has it come to life? One of the ways was that it inspired me to actually volunteer on a board of directors for a school for kids with autism. So I served on that board for 6 years. And it's tremendous to see the work that is being done to try to reach children at an early age where, the therapies can really make a difference, and to see how those children's lives are benefited from the right, approaches, from the right therapies. It's just tremendous. So I feel so fortunate to have been a part of that. I also found that going through the experience as a parent reminded me of experiences I had at a younger age, and probably the ideas around disability advocacy came from earlier times, although I hadn't thought about them in a while until we started helping my son. For instance, I actually dedicate the third book, Always Orchid, to Richard. Richard is a person I'd met when I was a child in our community who we met actually at a soda machine, and he would communicate with us by gesturing. He didn't speak to us. And I realized after he pointed at the baseball cap he was wearing and pointed at his name, Richard, that he probably couldn't speak, perhaps he couldn't hear, maybe he was reading our lips. But even despite all that, and perhaps because I was a child, you're so open-minded at that age, I just communicated with him. It didn't bother me that we didn't actually speak. And so myself, my friends invited him to play kickball with us, even though he was a bit older than us. It was okay. And he played kickball, and he just, you could see so much joy when he was just invited to participate with us and to be friends with us. It was such a pure, through that very innocent child's eyes, it was just such a pure way to connect with another human being. And so much of the theme we're talking about today has been around empathy. And I think that those seeds of empathy came at a very early age.
Excellent, thank you. And yes, as children, we don't judge. I think it's adults that teach children to judge, and we ought to actually learn from our children that lack of prejudice. So I need to thank our friends Amazon and my ClearText for keeping us on air and keeping us captioned and accessible. And thank you also, Carol, for your time and your inputs today. It's been really lovely to learn about your work and the series and the motivation behind it. So Thank you very much. And we look forward to having a discussion on social.
Thanks so much.